Botanic Garden was started in 1910, and it's really interesting to think about Alice's long-standing relationship with us. She came here as a child in probably what was our first decade of classes at the Botanic Garden, and she got some seeds to start her on her path in gardening, and she's been here ever since. So,
yes, I have always loved jobs that challenge my imagination, and I've always had a lot of imagination. I can still walk on a job and think of 2 or 3 different ways that it could be worked out, but you have to find the best way to fit in with the people that own the place. So every job is different, but every job is exciting. I have been interested in all different kinds of jobs because of the fact that I have liked different areas and different kinds of people. And therefore, when someone calls and says, as they do very often over the phone, well, I have a very tiny little backyard. I'll say, how large is it? And they'll say, well, it's maybe 20 by 40. And I said, well, that's a big city yard. And we can do a lot of things, and I'll come and visit you and have your little site plan ready. And then the next phone call might be somebody that says, I have 100 acres. And I think, isn't that exciting? To do it on the radio, Malcolm, they would always count down.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, and action.
Welcome to this documentary. This is really a story of my life as a landscape architect over these last many, many years. It's a profession that I have enjoyed thoroughly, and I hope many other people hearing this will think about studying landscape architecture. This house, 45 Willow Street in Brooklyn Heights, has been in my family for 5 generations. It was bought by my great-grandfather, and he lived here with his whole family for a few years. And after he died, there were 2 maiden aunts that lived here in the house. At that time, I was living with my family in Flatbush on Martenth Street in an apartment. And Mother and Daddy decided they would like to buy this house from my aunts, and so eventually we moved in. It really has been a joy to have a family house like this for so many years. And I think my children loved growing up here, and I know that I have enjoyed these years when I've been living alone and continuing my work from this site right here.
and you spent time.
It was particularly nice because I could spend time at Green Harbor, which was my country home in Massachusetts. The children were the 5th generation to live in that house. The original room had belonged to Donald Webster, and it had been added on from time to time. But we had a little farm there, and so my grandfather ran it as a farm. He had cows and chickens and horses, and it was a wonderful place to go every summer for 3 whole months. At Green Harbor, when I would living there in the summertime, I would work with my grandfather, and he would show me exactly how to pull the little seedlings up that you didn't want to keep, so that you had the proper spacing between your plants. And then as the plants grew, I would weed them and take care of them. And he was always teaching me how to do things, which made it interesting. And we had cows too, and I learned how to milk a cow, which was something. I think it's interesting to note that the love that I had for this area we call Green Harbor, my grandfather's farm, was very much with me when I would come back to the city. And it really made me decide that I wanted to do something with my hands and ability to work outdoors. I really think that this helped me so much in deciding that I wanted to be a landscape architect, and finally decided on this Cambridge School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture. There were 60 girls that were accepted each year, and we had all the different professors from the Cambridge School, and I really felt that I would get an excellent education, which I did. Well, over the years I've done everything. I've had a partner and a big office and then a small office, and I have discovered that as time went on that I could work very comfortably from here. This was particularly nice when the children were in high school and I didn't have to pick them up and everything. They were on their own, and then I could come home. And it's very flexible living at home, because if you are not working that day, you can make jelly or marmalade or something. It's fun, and I love to cook. So I really enjoy working from home, and I found that it works out very well.
I think Alice is from a generation of women that, you know, tended to be very remarkable in many ways, because they were trendsetters. They did a lot of things that women had never done before, and took quite a long while for women to do in the modern era. But there was a core of women in her generation that were wonderful in that way, and she's certainly an example of the highest order, I think. I admire her for carrying on with her family and raising 3 children alone after a certain time when her husband died suddenly, and being able to gear up her landscape business again is almost as if she had never stopped, and build it into quite a wonderful practice, and still, you know, be going at this stage in the game. I don't think she will ever stop. I don't think she wants to stop, and there's really no reason she should. I mean, she's absolutely fantastic on the job. I mean, that's when she's the most engaged.
Beautiful. Those yellow hyacinths are so pretty. Oh, lovely. Oh, that is darling. Most of my clients have been wonderful, and I enjoy working with them, and that's why I have had so many of them continue on all this time. Fred, I think the driveway works out very well now. You know, you wanted to change it one time, but I like it this way. And I love these yellow magnolias in here. Oh, beautiful. Absolutely stunning. I know it. Fun is that when you meet a client and you find out what they want and you give them what you want, you know that it makes a very happy life for them.
This portico looks like it's been there for 50 years, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it was just put in.
Yeah, I know.
We talked about how to do it, and Fred thinks those little boxwoods should be bigger, but they'll come up. And I feel that I have opened the doors to telling them how they can have a beautiful place and not have too much to maintain, and that it's really helpful if they take this interest. This is a little dog's burial ground, and it was just flat in the ground, but we built it up and put the little weeping cherry here, and we're going to keep it with little flowers for the summer and all. I would much rather have a client that had an interest in their property than one that says, well, you do what you want, because it isn't what I want, it's really what they want.
This river stone came out so beautiful.
Yes, it did, and I love all the little things growing in it.
When you work with Alice, you get Alice. You get her heart and soul. She'll go around our property now, and she's planning things for 10 years from now. And who knows whether we'll be there or she'll be there, but it's what she thinks is right, and she thinks is something that we will enjoy. She's sort of someone I could always look up to because of her hard work, her dedication, and her total joy in what she does.
You see this from your bedroom.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fun.
I tell you, that, you know, you just have to take a little bit at a time here.
I know.
I try to take a little bit at a time because every place is so beautiful. And I build some buildings and have dealt with some of the best architects in the world. And what I found is the better the architect, the nicer they are, as opposed to the feeling that people might have when they're not easy to deal with. I find the architects very easy to deal with, and I find Alice very easy to deal with. I mean, she knows what is good for us, and she's so prepared that you know it when she describes it. Alice is very strong in her opinions because she's very sure of her abilities, so that if you waver some, and I suspect that Judy hasn't from time to time, she'll come back to it, and she'll generally convince you that she's right. And when she has, and we've benefited from that because she was right, and she has been right all the times for all the things that she's done for us. We've had such a pleasurable relationship that I almost feel that if I can't be there on a particular day when Judy's going to go around with Alice on that golf cart we have, that woe for me. I've lost the best part of the day.
You just have to keep after the one and the old one.
The beauty of this working with Alice, there's really no average day.
We do a lot of erasing.
Yes, we do.
Everything is different, and we never know quite what to expect related to what's happening with the client or a job. Things will have to change, but we tend to start early, 8 to 9, and go over the schedule for the day, the schedule for the week, what jobs have to be seen, what messages have come in from clients, the correspondence. The spring is a horrendously busy time, everybody wanting everything instantly, and having to relate to that and try and arrange it.
I'll bring you up to what has been done. They've started the grading on it, and Jack feels that we need quite a lot more topsoil.
It is a funny office situation. We don't have a fax machine. We are not in the 20th century here. We still use carbon paper, which many people think is not even made anymore. We have an electric typewriter, which is remarkable, I guess. Many things that people find absolutely incredible, the way we operate. But, it works for Alice and it works for me, and we get the job done, I guess, in one fashion or another.
Over the years, I have noticed that so many people want very much the same type of thing. And the first thing is a proper approach to your front door. And whether it's a very small house on a main street in a village, or whether it's a large country estate, you have to think about this very important part of a landscape. The second thing is outdoor sitting areas, because people love to enjoy the outdoor part of their property all during the nice months. And thirdly, I think trees are so important because they are the structural part of the plan. They take a long time to mature, but they're so important to give shade and interest in your property. And lastly, I think people love to have a little water feature, whether it's just for the birds or as large as a pond. It's nice to be able to see water someplace on your property. Well, I actually have 8 jobs that I want to finish up this fall, and it has to be done in the next 2 weeks because I'm going to be away after that. Not having a family, not having a lot of responsibilities gives me much more time to concentrate on just work. Really, I've become a workaholic, I guess, because I do think about them all the time.
Even my crew members are very keen on working with Alice because she doesn't waste time, which is also very important to anyone in business. Alice can lay out about a week's work in about a morning, and most architects that we deal with take a lot longer than that to do the same amount of work. But I think that comes because Alice really thinks through a garden and knows what she wants and knows where she wants to place things. Alice is not afraid of change in any way. Alice steps right in and is willing to make big changes, and she does that with finesse and she does it with strength. And that, I think that's one of the shining features of an Alice Ireys garden.
Many, many times when I arrive at a house, I find that I can't find the front door. And this always distresses me because I think it should be very obvious where you enter this lovely house that you're about to improve by landscaping. So the approach is very important. It should be a wide path to the front door, as wide in some places as 7 or 8 feet. It should be well paved, well lighted, and properly planted. Now all of these things can be done easily if you realize that this is the most important part of your property and you have to put time and thought on it. In the places that we're going to see, the first one is 5 acres and has a long curving driveway coming into an entrance court. In the center of the courtyard, a red maple, Acer rubrum, is the focal point of the driveway. When I arrived at the day we were planting, they had put the tree right in the middle of the planting strip, which I immediately changed so that it was put to the left and you could see underneath the tree rather than into the trunk. One of the things I love to incorporate in my garden that have garages that are visible from the street or from the house or something is a little vine crawling over the garage doors. And one of my friends says, that's Alice's eyebrow treatment for the garage. And what it really is getting a vine started at each corner of the garage, training it up the edge, having some sort of a contraption to hold it up over the garage doors, and it'll keep growing on and on. Now we use it sometimes with wisteria and sometimes with fleece vine, and it could even be used with clematis, but that takes a much longer time to get going. This is a visit out to the Hamptons to check on my 10 different jobs out here. And I like to do it in the early spring or late winter so that we can see whether the trees need more pruning and whether any of them have fallen over. Hi dear, how are you? Here I am limping along.
Oh Lord.
The interesting thing on this job is that the house was moved 5 miles from the center of town to the midst of a potato field. And we had to determine exactly where it was to be placed and how the driveway was to come in.
The good thing about Alice has been that she focuses on the bones of your whole yard and the whole landscaping picture rather than, you know, where we're going to put the pink, white, and blue flowers. That's not, you know, she can do that and is delighted to give you advice, but the key thing is siting the house, where you put it on the lot, and that was the most important thing I think Alice did for us in addition to anchoring it with trees.
And so we planted 7 different kinds of trees, and now 15 years later, they look as though they have been there for a long, long time. The curving driveway makes a very informal approach to this formal little courtyard that is enclosed with inkberry. This is an inkberry hedge here that Wheezy takes care of, and I come in and say, cut it down a little more. But now it's just right.
And I said, yes, sir.
But now it's just right, Wheezy, because you can't see over it and people can't see the cars.
I try and keep it at nose level.
Nose level.
Nose level.
That's a good idea. Wonderful. It's very important to have standby help, and I am very fortunate in having a driver. I can work on my way out to each job because every job takes at least an hour to get to. And so if you get stuck in traffic, you can pull out a little plan, finish a corner of the planting that I might do.
Every time we go to someone's house, she takes me on a different road. This way I can never remember how to get there again.
It isn't this one, it's the one after this, I think. This just goes into a little cul-de-sac.
And she always gives me directions. Make a right, make a left, make a right.
From left here, left. And then go right. Keep going, because we can go back anyway. We go left here. We turn right, and then we'll turn right again. And look at that, isn't it ghastly? I mean, some of these places are so horrible.
When we were laying out the driveway. She knew what the curves had to be so that we could bring in a 50-passenger bus. She knew the radiuses for the parking court. She knew what the scale of large plantings and large trees would be in a large landscape, because that's what she had dealt with. A lot of garden designers really kind of know that coreopsis looks good with blue sage or something. Alice knew all of that, but she also was an architect and could really handle just about, handle any space. Alice would go in the Jeep and she would point out what has to be done, and also Alice has a mind like a steel trap. She would remember things from 3 or 4 visits before that we hadn't done. So we were really called on it and said, why haven't you done this, Brad? And Brad, I think that we ought to do this. And all of our notes, she had them, we had to write them down, but she kept them in her head.
Her stamina and level of energy is remarkable, certainly now, and has been, I'm sure, through her whole career. I mean, she kind of runs circles around most people. And when she's engaged on a job, I mean, that's when it's the highest.
It's like an army maneuver before Alice comes. So we have all of our drawings ready, we've got everything set up, we've got lunch.
She's very punctual. She does not like people who are not punctual. She's always at meetings on time. She prefers to arrive somewhere exactly when she says she's going to. And when she's ready to leave, she's ready to leave.
I'm always late and Alice is always early, so that always kind of threw us, that Alice would arrive early. And I'm never prepared for people who arrive early. And he calls at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning to make sure that everything's okay. That's when she does business, and I'm not awake. Really, for our job, it was really more of a team kind of feeling, or at least in her great wisdom, she gave us the feeling that it was a team, even though I don't think it really was, because we all knew that she knew the best. But we like to think that it was a team effort, and we certainly all came out with our egos intact. So, but I think that Alice was really the guiding hand and the genius in this whole thing.
I have already mentioned how important terraces and outdoor living aspects are on a property, whether it's very large or very tiny. And in these pictures that we see here are the different sizes of terraces that one can have on a property. Outdoor terraces, particularly with flagstone or brick paving, can be as large or as small as you need for your living conditions. In one case, we were asked to make it for 50 people, and so I had to think carefully of how 50 people would fit on this particular terrace. In other cases, the terraces are just for breakfast, and it's only for 3 people, and so you have a tiny little area that has herbs around it, nice to sit in when you're eating breakfast or in the late afternoon. And then again, we see terraces that instead of having a flagstone or brick terrace, for the outdoor living, we have decks, and the decks can again be several different levels and many different sizes. And the third type of outdoor living is a covered porch. It's very nice to have it screened in so that you can use it at all times of the day and in the evening when there are many flies and bugs around.
Watching Alice on the job is like watching a conductor in front of an orchestra. And it's true. She will stand back. She sees the entire scope of what needs to be done. There'll be, 3 or 4 contractors of various descriptions around the property. One siting plants, one digging here. Alice, most often than not with her cane, pointing, directing what needs to be done where, and everybody listens and hops too.
We have to go under, this is all undercover. The garage is exactly where it is on the plan, but the door is here.
It would be nice if, it was sort of enclosed.
And I've come to love her. I mean, she's a dear, and she's great fun, and I love the way she thinks of my life. She said, now you want to have 50 people here for dinner, and you want 5 round tables, and do you think you'll want to have such and such over here, or do you want to do it that way? And I just love the idea that she thinks I'm going to be entertaining, and I think maybe I will.
So we like the idea of being able to have this large enough to have 50 people on it, which is one of the requirements. And we have decided that we would put this circular wall around that we're building now, and then we're having the steps down from the house onto the terrace and from the new living room out onto the terrace.
She's so firm. It's astounding to me. She's 86 years old, and she's up on the job site, and she just calls the shots the way they are. And, I just find it gives me a lot of pleasure just to be involved.
Oh, Ellen, I think it's so exciting. When I came to the living room door and looked out, I was absolutely thrilled to pieces because it's the way I imagined it, a lovely, large terrace for your big, big family. And I hope you'll have many, many happy days here having parties and cocktail parties and children's parties and everything like that.
Well, I can't tell you, it's the one thing that everybody comes to the door and says, wow. I knew your terrace was going to be great, but I didn't know it was going to be this terrific.
There are a few little things that I think we could consider, and one is that we really need a little bit more shade on this big terrace. And I would suggest that we use 2 river birch over near the house, right over there, and that they will come up and won't be too much in the way of Jimmy's bedroom up there, and they'll give a pretty upright feeling.
I don't know what design you want to put in brickwork on there. And then the fence around it.
I had thought that we would have a little brick path up to the fence and then a gate. The path will be right here.
Oh, way to the right, okay. So actually the path...
The path is right there. Begin at the other end. And I want it 1 foot. One foot
off. This is the first time I worked with a landscape architect of this magnitude. Her designs are unique. She worked well with me. I mean, she always gave me good specs to work with.
So the path will be right in here.
Actually, yeah, so you just line it up. The outside of the path is on the 2 joint marks of that bluestone.
All right.
Effervescent. She's got more energy than I do, and I'm half her age. And it's pleasurable to work with.
I think if you have an old tree near the house, this makes a wonderful place for an outdoor terrace, because in the summertime, shade is so very important. And while we can plant a young tree, I know that it's going to take 10 or 12 years before that tree gives adequate shade to a particular spot. So if you have an old tree, think about making a terrace beneath it.
You know, Alice Ireys has helped me with my gardens for over, 25 years at least. And she's wonderful. And we've tramped through nurseries together, and I'd see a tree that I particularly liked that wasn't in her plan, and I'd say, Mrs. Ireys, I have to have that one, and she always fitted it into the plan, which was just wonderful, because, you know, a lot of people just do it their way or not at all, as you know.
The porch that I'd like to show you is a very large porch used for family gatherings and overlooks Long Island Sound. In the pictures here you see how nicely arranged the furniture is and how delightful the planting containers become a part of this whole outdoor living area. The porch was designed to be used throughout the nice months of the year, and it is here that they gather and extend over onto the open lawn, since they all are at the same level. And there is a chance to be out on the grass or on the porch, depending upon the weather conditions. To show this place particularly because it has such an interesting background. This old urn that's back by the hollies was purchased at a thrift shop, and it really is a bird bath when water is kept in it, and it's fun to see all the different kinds of birds enjoy the splashing of the water in that little bird bath. This particular area is nice because it's very restful. Just the privet hedge, the crab apples, and the hollies. And I think it makes a lovely spot to sit here on this big porch in these rocking chairs that came from Virginia and look at this lovely, quiet, restful spot. And then I think I've been proud in helping young people. An awful lot of young people have come to me and say, which way do I go and how can I get started, and things like that.
I spent the most magical year working with Alice. I was helping her organize her archives before she sent them up to Smith College. And I look forward to going to that beautiful house on Willow Street and being in Alice's world, because I was exposed to this most amazing body of work. And I was also doing some work of my own in landscape architecture, and between, like at a lunch break or coming up from the archives, I asked Alice if she wouldn't mind looking at something I was working on, and Alice's eyes always lit up. She was so excited to do this. One of Alice's great gifts is really the fact that she can try something new and make it look like it's as old as nature itself, because it works. I mean, it looks like nature intended it to be that way. Alice allows plants to grow where they're happiest and where they look like they should grow. Living landscapes, and it's not just plants growing, it's people enjoying the landscapes. Alice makes her gardens for the people that live in them, and I would say that's Alice's fourth dimension, is the people walking through her gardens.
Well, Betty Scholz is my dearest friend and came from South Africa in 1960 and has been a very beloved member of the garden. I always say that she is really Miss Brooklyn Botanic Garden because...
Oh, thank you, Alice. But there's some more cornucosas down here, so we can probably see a cornucosa in the sun.
Right.
There's another kusa in the sun. Look at it, another little one and another big one.
Because
brilliant.
That one is probably about 5 years old, and the big one is 25. And we
it's wonderful that you are so involved with trees, because after all they are the bones of the garden, and it's important that you should know which trees grow to what height and when they flower and so on.
Yes, I know.
If Alice were a tree, what tree would she be?
Well, that's a good question, Malcolm. I think I would be an oak tree.
I was going to guess an oak for you.
Trees are really the strongest structural element in your plan. They are the most important plant material to select. So please always consider putting them in at the very beginning of your planting schedule. They provide structure, which is important. They provide color, and they certainly provide texture and different kinds of interest in their bloom, all the features you need to create an interesting garden design. On returning to a property that I haven't seen in many years, I always look at how the trees are coming along. And I think, have we planted the right varieties? Have they been taken care of properly? Are they the best tree that we could have used? Are they giving the shade that we need? And these are all things that we thought about in the beginning of designing, and now many years later, I look at them to see if they are doing their job.
When we built the house in 1953, there was nothing but the elm tree and a pear tree on the property. It was an open field, and she does everything planting. The works is due to Alice Ireys. I think the world of her.
In this picture of a beach alley, we planted the beech trees when they were 10 to 12 feet high. The house had just been completed, and I felt it was nice to put a whole avenue of beech trees, 15 each side of the driveway as you come down to this pretty English house. It was hard to think that those trees would grow up, but now, 40 years later, every time I go into this property, I say, oh, aren't those beech trees beautiful?
Alice Recknagel Ireys is like an old shoe. It's more comfortable as you wear it. And the more I deal with her, the more I love her, and I love her dearly.
A large colonial house with an entrance court that we made needed special trees each side of the corners of the house, and we used honey locust. These trees grow very fast. They have the advantage of not dropping their leaves until the end of fall, and then they drop in all at once. And they have a very interesting shape and are a wonderful tree to use in a situation like this. These trees were planted 12 years ago and now frame the whole house beautifully. Another reason I think trees are so important is because they can form these beautiful avenues that I love to make. One of the houses that I did last summer was a gorgeous house that had been built by a well-known architect, and it needed trees. The two trees in front were very nice, but there were no trees along the driveway. And this is it right here on the right with all these crab apples. Wait a minute, go slowly so we can see right along here. So we put in Zelkova trees, about 20 of them, and it's made all the difference in the world. In just one planting of those trees, the place looks settled down and properly landscaped by just putting in those trees. Then we went on, and in the big areas around this house, used some beautiful beech trees. So I think it's very important when you are faced with a property that has no trees to specialize in putting in the trees, because, as I have said, they should be planted early on, and they will then develop and be the important statement that they should be in your landscape. And this is my very good friend, Galen, who is helping me tremendously because she's my feet and my ears and my hands and everything. And on this job and many of the others she's helped on too, so I depend upon her an awful lot. It's wonderful to have her. Hold it, a little bit more. Back 1 foot, go back 1 foot. And over that way a little more. I want them just touching. Really beautiful. But the whole place looks so nice now as you drive in, except the entrance and by the corner of the terrace and that one other spot. Come forward a little. Yeah, that's there. All right, and come, move over to the right a bit. Now come here a minute, I want to ask you something. I think it's important to look at the planting from this point, and therefore we will place the 2 hollies first, which are nice and big and strong, and then we will place the little ones around them. All right, there. This house that needed trees so very much because it had this long driveway, was made much more attractive by having these vistas as you pass through the trees, under the trees, of the house. And I felt that was very important, to not look at everything at once, but to look through these trees to the house. And we'll leave that one big tree because that does help to camouflage the house. But we'll take out the 2 Lombardy poplars and put in cypress, which will grow up and hide the house. And that is the big job to do this spring. This is my first visit since we did the planting on Thursday, and I am delighted to see how it really looks after having planned it carefully on a piece of paper, to see it really now developing so nicely. The background planting by the building on the property line, the next door neighbors, really is camouflaged pretty well. And when the deciduous trees come out, I know it will make a great difference. I feel there is still one more limb that we should remove on the left-hand side of the maple. The lower branch on the left has to come out. We had already taken one out. It's disturbing to have that line going up like that, where it would be much better to see the cedar trees and the inkberries and things like that below it, and not have that coming up. The 2 little red jade flowering crab apples, we had to turn a couple of times to get them so that they both came together in a way that accents the view into the far border. They were supposed to have trimmed the crab apples last fall, but I don't think it has been done.
Yeah, it looks
Oh
like
yes, I can see, yes, they have done it. But they didn't trim inside very well, they just did the outside. I might talk to them crab apples.
Alice, have you ever gotten any tickets? You ever get any speeding tickets?
I would say she is the most diversified plants person in the design business I've ever met. She knows more plants, knows more about them and how to use them properly than any of the rest of the design people I know, bar none. Oops, sorry folks.
Most clients don't really know about plant materials, so it is a question of educating them to look at plants and see how they look. And again, it's nice to take clients to nurseries to look at plants and say, now this is a particularly good specimen, the Chamiciferous or cypresses. Great variety, from little low ones of 3 feet to great big tall ones of 60 feet. It's nice to show them what they look like and tell them how well they grow in this area.
You think they're tall enough, Mrs. Curry, to hide that house? No. These in here?
I have a couple 20, 25 foot.
But I'm just saying, the ones that we put there in the front 30 years ago, they've certainly done beautifully.
I know. I saw some photos.
When they were
Tiny. Everything
Really?
looks like a baby.
She put me onto that one. Alice has put me onto a lot of plants.
Well, I think experience has helped a lot. As one of my favorite nurserymen said, we listen to you, Alice, because you've had a hell of a lot of years.
The other nice thing is to be able to plant a landscape that in 10 years still looks great, which Alice does and most people don't.
Many people, whether they have a very small city garden or a very large country garden, want to have some sort of a water feature. And it can start with a simple little bird bath. There's also many other ways that you can have water for the birds to enjoy. In one of our gardens, we did 2 different levels, and here the birds will have a wonderful time in the upper level. Then the water drops to the lower level. But this idea of having water in the garden really adds a great deal, and I've been so interested that people have said, please give me a water feature. This picture shows a waterfall that comes cascading down a hillside. It is about 50 feet long and ends in a very nice pool which is filled with fish. This brook, around which you can walk, makes a very nice stroll on an early morning. One of the larger ponds that we did was for a very small, old stone house near the Pennsylvania border.
Well, she drove down the driveway, and we had never met, only spoken on the phone and corresponded. And when she drove up, she got out of the car, and before she greeted us, she said, "That pool will have to go." And she said a house of this age must have a pond. So then she proceeded to design the pond. And she also said it should have stone walls. And
the last 14 years of building dry stone walls.
There was nothing but a hayfield around the house, and we decided to dig out a pond. I carefully laid out exactly how I felt it should be, and came back in a few weeks to find that it was much larger than I thought. We built a bridge that is lovely to look at from the main part of the house, and this too has become the focal point of this very charming little pond. I felt it would be nice to have a particular flower family coming in bloom around the pond, and so we have used 5 different kinds of irises in clumps around the pond. So we have iris that bloom in the very early spring and through July that make it lovely to look at all during the time they're in bloom. It's interesting to note that now, 10 years after this pond was built, it really looks as though it's been there forever. And that, I think, is one reason we all enjoy it, and people that come to see it for the first time are amazed that it's just recently been built. So if any of you want to build a pond, it takes time, of course, and a lot of maneuvering, because nowadays you have to have permits for ponds. But if you do build one, you'll find that you get many, many happy hours observing it. Even in the city, you can have a water feature. And here in this picture, you will see a very narrow place at the edge of the house that we put in a garden with water and interesting shade-loving plants. It's 4 feet below the terrace and was constructed with the idea that you could hear the sound of water when you were drinking your coffee in the morning, because it's near enough for you to see easily. This is made of lead, and we had it designed so that it was fitted into this very narrow spot with a little fountain above it. And the nice thing about it is you can see this little trough from all angles of the porch, as well as when you are walking down the steps into the lower area. Of course, you see it with all its little evergreens around it. The sound of water, even when the airplanes are going overhead, is still very much in evidence, and I think it makes one of the very nicest features of this terrace. And one of the things I remember, of course, is the lecturing that I have done all along the eastern seaboard here, because it is fun to lecture to people that you know are anxious to learn something about the subject that you are telling them.
Because every time we arranged a course on landscaping, it would fill up immediately. And people would bring in their garden plans, and she'd work on their garden plans with them. So as a result, I think that there are literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of gardens all over Brooklyn, the 5 boroughs of New York, New Jersey, and even Connecticut, people who came to learn from you.
Alice and I just became closer and closer because we shared this passion for gardening. And we had so much in common, and we traveled together when she received her award for the American Horticulture Society as the landscape architect of the year. I went down with her and was there with her when she got the award, when she got the Forsythia Award from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. And it's our shared passion that has brought us together. And she treats me as a daughter, and she's been my mentor and a mother figure to me, and it's just a wonderful relationship. I love her dearly.
Well, it was interesting to note that I never had really thought much about writing a book, but one day I was at a symposium at the New York Times building, and this lady came up to me and introduced herself, and she said, "I want to talk to you about writing a book." And I said, "Well, I don't think I have any time to write a book." And she said, "Yes, you can make time. You have to organize your life so you can make time." And she said it would be very good for you to write a book. And so I did meet her eventually, and we talked about it. And the subject that we kept coming back to was how to plan and plant your own property. Because this was at the time when very few people ever thought about planting their own property. They would get somebody to come in and help them, but to do it in an organized fashion was something quite different. And all of this was in this book, which really was very helpful to people. The other one is Small Gardens for City and Country, and it gives people ideas of what to do in a tiny little place. Then the third one is this American Gardens that Burpee put out. They asked me to do little sketches of gardens with the Burpee seeds, showing picture on one side, list of plants on the other, and how to plant this little area. And so that book has been very popular.
When you boil it down, the lesson from Alice is to follow your passion, follow your loves, and give it your all. And that's what she does. This is a woman that was a forerunner to all of the women's lib groups. She has boundless energy, and she's cut out of the same cloth as a few women who have been with her all the way along the way in the Brooklyn Botanic Garden and in Brooklyn. That includes Betty Scholz, who's our director emeritus, and Fady Tuttle, who's a past chairman of the board of our trustees, and Clem Castendieck, who was very involved in our early film projects here at Brooklyn Botanic Garden. The four of them are irrepressible. They just bounce along all the time with their endless energy. And I think for all of us, that's a great source of inspiration.
Because Alice has never shown any signs that she had a thought of retiring. She was going to keep on in her indefatigable way, working day after day. And that inspired me to do the same thing, and I'm still working daily.
We're coming up upon the Fragrance Garden, which is one of the most special things that Alice has done at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. It's a garden that's designed for the blind and for the physically challenged, and it was a pioneering idea when it was first put here in 1955. So once again, Alice's pioneering path as a designer is very much in evidence here in the Fragrance Garden. And the design of the garden was also really typical of Alice's approach to designing. She didn't decide what she thought blind people would enjoy in a garden. She talked to blind people. She engaged them in the design process. so that what she came up with here in this garden truly is of use and of benefit to the people who it's meant to be enjoyed by. Now, of course, you don't have to be blind to enjoy the garden. Everyone can enjoy sniffing and smelling all these beautiful plants that have fragrant flowers or fragrant foliage. But it was laid out and provided with educational signs that the blind can enjoy because they're written in Braille. They have raised Braille letters on them so that the blind can tell what plant it is that they are looking at, or that they can tell what plant it is that they're smelling and feeling. Also, the beds are raised so that people in wheelchairs are at just the right height to enjoy the garden. So Alice was very sensitive to the needs of the end users of this garden, and you can see how she's been able to incorporate that in an absolutely beautiful design that's loved by everybody. It's one of our most popular features at the garden.
I think I love this garden because it's a restful place, and it's also a place that children and with their mothers come. And so many times when I've come here and sat for a few minutes, I'll see young mothers bring their children in, and the children have fun running around the area, the oval area, and the mothers have fun having a chance to sit and be quiet. So I think that's one of the reasons that I love it. And then another reason is that the gardens for fragrance for the blind was something that was very unusual when we started this. I think this was about the first. And since then, there have been so many built throughout the country that it's nice to know that the idea that Dr. Avery had at that time has been so well received by everyone in the United States and abroad, too.
Alice has had such an important influence on this garden through her teachings, through her design work, through her activities as a volunteer, that a few years ago we awarded her our Distinguished Service Medal because she truly has been one of the most generous contributors to what people enjoy and love about the Brooklyn Botanic Garden.
Anyway, this idea of having the Brooklyn Botanic Garden as my backbone of my whole career, I think is very important. And I think it's wonderful that they have let me come here and study and give my courses and plan different things, because it has meant so much to me over these years. And I want to thank particularly Judy Zuck and Betty Scholz and many of the others who have helped me make this garden a really living part of my profession. Is that enough?
It was great, except you're
Weepy. All right, in ending, I would like to thank all of my clients who have been so generous in letting me show their places and talk about their places, and particularly to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden for all they've done. Is that short and sweet?
Excellent. Guess what? We're done.
How wonderful.